There is a story humanity has been telling itself for decades, and it may be the most beautiful and dangerous illusion our species has ever embraced. This narrative sounds compelling and even logical on the surface. We look at Mars and see a cold, barren, and empty world, but one that is fundamentally conquerable. The common belief is that all we need is enough ambition, the right pressurized habitats, powerful heating systems, and the same relentless drive that pushed our ancestors across unmapped oceans and over uncharted mountain ranges. In this telling, Mars is simply the next great frontier, a sleeping world waiting patiently for the first human boots to press into its rust-colored soil and claim it for civilization. However, that story is not merely incomplete. It is a profound misreading of the most savage and unforgiving physical realities in the known universe. Mars is not sleeping, it is not waiting, and it is not a challenge that sufficiently clever engineering will eventually overcome. Mars is a murdered planet, and the laws that governed its destruction are the same laws that govern every atom in the cosmos. These principles are permanent, universal, and entirely indifferent to human ambition or ingenuity. To genuinely understand what Mars is, you cannot begin with its surface features, its thin atmosphere, its frozen polar caps, or the spectacular canyon systems carved across its face. The real story begins somewhere far less visible and far more consequential deep inside the planet itself, in a planetary engine that stopped running billions of years ago and will never run again under any circumstances that physics permits. Beneath your feet right now, at the center of Earth, something extraordinary is happening continuously. An enormous sphere of solid iron sits at the very core of our planet, surrounded by a vast, churning ocean of liquid metal that rotates and moves under conditions of pressure and temperature so extreme they exist beyond ordinary human comprehension. This spinning ocean of molten metal is not a geological curiosity or an interesting footnote in a textbook. Without exaggeration, it is the single most important biological fact about our planet. Remove it, and nothing alive on this surface would exist. Not a single bacterium, not a blade of grass, not one human being would survive. The physics behind this relationship is as elegant as it is ruthless. A moving electrical conductor generates a surrounding magnetic field. This is one of the foundational laws of electromagnetism, as certain and non-negotiable as gravity itself. The liquid iron core of Earth is precisely that conductor, churning continuously and producing a magnetic field of extraordinary scale that extends far beyond the atmosphere, deep into surrounding space. This invisible structure is called the magnetosphere, and it forms a protective dome around the entire planet, deflecting the most energetic and destructive particles streaming toward Earth from the Sun and from the violent depths of interstellar space. Remove that engine, and the dome collapses instantly. The geometry of protection simply ceases to exist, and this is not a hypothetical warning assembled for dramatic effect. This is the documented physical history of Mars, where the core froze long ago. The geodynamo, the planetary engine responsible for generating the Martian magnetic field, died permanently. Billions of years ago, this smaller planet, with less internal mass and less retained heat than Earth, exhausted the thermal energy required to keep its iron interior molten and mobile. The engine switched off with the kind of absolute, irreversible finality that thermodynamic law enforces without exception, without appeal, and without any possibility of reversal. In that single geological moment, the invisible protective dome surrounding Mars dissolved completely, leaving an entire world naked and exposed to the full, raw violence of the surrounding universe. What followed was not one catastrophic event, but a slow, mathematically inevitable destruction that permanently rewrote the planet's future and sealed humanity's fate on its surface long before our species ever drew its first breath. Picture a medieval castle shielded by a powerful energy dome that has been flawlessly deflecting a continuous barrage of burning projectiles for millions of years. The attackers are relentless, and the bombardment never pauses, but the dome holds firm, redirecting every incoming projectile harmlessly away from the walls and the people sheltering within. Now imagine the underground engine powering that dome grinding to a permanent halt. The dome vanishes in an instant. The projectiles strike the outer walls, then tear through the air itself, eventually consuming everything within. The castle does not fall in one dramatic moment. It is consumed steadily and completely over geological time. That is precisely what happened to Mars, and the physics behind it is as cold and precise as mathematics itself. Once the magnetosphere collapsed, Mars faced the most powerful continuous force in the solar system with absolutely no protection. The Sun is not simply a distant, gentle source of light and warmth. It is an enormous thermonuclear engine blasting the surrounding solar system with a relentless stream of highly energetic charged particles, consisting of protons and electrons accelerated to millions of miles per hour, pouring outward from the solar surface in every direction without pause. This torrent is called the solar wind, and under normal planetary conditions, a functioning magnetosphere intercepts it and curves the particles safely around the planet. The charged particles follow the invisible magnetic geometry and continue harmlessly into space, never reaching the fragile atmosphere below. Mars no longer had that geometry, so the solar wind arrived at the completely unprotected Martian atmosphere and encountered zero resistance. What followed was not a violent explosion or a single devastating event, but something in many ways far more destructive. A continuous, relentless erosion operating at the molecular level across billions of years. The energetic particles of the solar wind collided with individual molecules in the upper Martian atmosphere, transferring momentum with enough force to accelerate those molecules beyond the planet's escape velocity. One molecule at a time, across geological timescales too vast for human intuition to genuinely grasp, the atmosphere of Mars was methodically stripped away and lost permanently to space. This destructive process is called atmospheric sputtering, and it ranks among the most consequential physical mechanisms in all of planetary science. The Sun did not merely irradiate Mars from a comfortable distance. It systematically vacuumed the air off the planet molecule by molecule, dismantling the atmospheric shield that separates a living world from the void of space. What was once a thicker, warmer, and chemically richer atmosphere was reduced across billions of years to the thin and barely coherent wisp of carbon dioxide that constitutes the Martian atmosphere today. This has left a surface pressure roughly equivalent to just 1% of what exists at Earth's sea level. That number deserves a moment of full consideration. At 1% of Earth's atmospheric pressure, liquid water cannot persist on the surface under any conditions. It either freezes solid or evaporates immediately, incapable of remaining in the stable liquid state that all known biology requires. At this critically low atmospheric pressure, a human being standing unprotected on the Martian surface would not gradually suffocate or slowly freeze to death. Instead, the pressure differential would cause their blood to effectively boil within seconds. There is no transition period, no possibility of acclimatization, and no engineering solution that changes this outcome. The physics is absolute, and the verdict is immediate. But the loss of the atmosphere introduced a consequence even more devastating than the disappearance of breathable air. Once the atmospheric column was sufficiently thinned, Mars lost its second layer of protection against something far more dangerous than the solar wind: the cosmic radiation streaming in from the deepest and most violent regions of the galaxy. This is precisely where the situation transitions from merely lethal to genuinely irreversible for human biology in ways that no technology can meaningfully address. Cosmic rays are not the gentle photons of visible sunlight that warm your skin pleasantly on a clear afternoon. They are subatomic particles, including protons, helium nuclei, and heavier atomic fragments accelerated to relativistic velocities by the most catastrophically violent events the galaxy produces, such as supernova explosions, collisions between neutron stars, and the colossal electromagnetic accelerators surrounding black holes. These particles travel through interstellar space in every direction simultaneously, carrying energy so extreme that they arrive at planetary surfaces as a constant, penetrating rain of atomic projectiles moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. On Earth, this radiation rain is absorbed and deflected by two overlapping protective layers working in concert. The magnetosphere curves away the charged component of cosmic radiation before it even approaches the upper atmosphere, while the thick atmospheric column absorbs and weakens whatever manages to penetrate through. This reduces the radiation, reaching the surface to background levels that life evolved to tolerate across billions of years. The combined effect of magnetic shielding and atmospheric mass creates a radiation environment compatible with biological complexity. It is not accidental, but rather the specific physical architecture that made complex life possible here. Mars has neither protective layer in any meaningful form because its magnetosphere is gone and its atmosphere sits at a tiny fraction of Earth's density. Cosmic radiation arriving at the Martian surface is not meaningfully weakened by any planetary mechanism, meaning it reaches the ground carrying the full penetrating power of particles that have been accelerating across interstellar distances. Here is where the physical geometry of the problem becomes genuinely terrifying for anyone seriously considering a sustained human presence on that surface. A spacesuit is not a radiation shield, and a metal habitat wall is not a radiation shield either. These structures provide pressure containment, thermal regulation, and protection against micrometeorites, which are all real and impressive engineering achievements. However, cosmic ray particles striking the Martian surface carry enough penetrating energy to pass completely through the walls of any structure a human mission could realistically transport and construct on that planet. The particles do not stop at metal. They pass through human tissue the way a high-velocity projectile passes through water, depositing energy at each point of interaction along their path through the body. That deposited energy does not pass through harmlessly. It interacts directly with the most critically important molecular structures in the human body, specifically DNA. The molecule encoding every instruction for building and maintaining a living organism is a tightly wound, extraordinarily precise geometric structure whose biological information depends on the exact spatial arrangement of its chemical components, leaving zero tolerance for random disruption. When a high-energy cosmic ray particle passes through a cell nucleus and deposits its energy, it can break the chemical bonds within the DNA strand at two adjacent points simultaneously. Physicists and biologists call this a double-strand break, which is a complete severing of the molecular backbone that carries all genetic information. The human body possesses repair mechanisms for DNA damage, and these mechanisms are genuinely remarkable products of billions of years of biological refinement. However, they were developed and calibrated on a planet with a robust magnetic field and a thick atmosphere, an environment where background radiation reaching living tissue was attenuated by multiple overlapping layers of natural shielding. Those repair systems were built for Earth's radiation environment, not for the surface of an unprotected planet bombarded by cosmic rays arriving at full interstellar intensity. They simply cannot cope with the Martian radiation load. The rate of DNA damage on the Martian surface exceeds the biological capacity for repair, and that accumulated excess grows larger with every single passing day. The consequences of sustained radiation exposure beyond the body's repair capacity are not dramatic or sudden in the way that popular imagination tends to picture radiation damage. There is no single catastrophic moment of failure, and no immediate and obvious collapse occurs. What happens instead is a slow, mathematically certain accumulation of cellular damage that progressively dismantles the integrity of the genetic material in every cell throughout the body. This destructive process operates quietly and continuously at scales completely invisible to human perception, but its outcomes are as inevitable as the physical laws driving it forward every second. The immune system is among the first and most critical biological systems to show measurable effects. White blood cells are among the most rapidly dividing cells in the human body, and rapidly dividing cells are particularly vulnerable to radiation damage because DNA replication, under conditions of ongoing molecular disruption, introduces errors that compound across successive cell generations. As immune function steadily deteriorates, the body's ability to identify and eliminate damaged or abnormal cells declines in parallel. The risk of cancer does not merely rise as a statistical possibility. It accumulates as a mathematical certainty that grows incrementally larger with every additional day of exposure. The central nervous system, long considered relatively resistant to radiation damage due to the slow replication rate of neurons, has been demonstrated through research to suffer meaningful degradation from the specific type of high-energy particle radiation that characterizes the Martian surface environment. Cognitive function, memory consolidation, and neurological processing all show measurable deterioration under sustained cosmic ray exposure. The brain is not protected from particles that pass through metal walls by bone or tissue. The only shield that protects it on Earth is the invisible magnetic geometry extending thousands of kilometers into space, and that geometry simply does not exist on Mars. What this accumulating body of evidence describes is an environment that is not hostile in the way that extreme cold, extreme heat, or crushing pressure are hostile. Those environmental challenges represent genuine engineering problems, the kind that sufficiently clever design can address with insulation, active cooling systems, or reinforced pressure vessels. The radiation environment of Mars is hostile at a categorically different and far more fundamental level. It operates directly on the molecular geometry of biological matter through physical mechanisms that no engineering intervention can intercept, because the particles carrying that lethal energy pass straight through the engineering itself without slowing down. This distinction is the most important and the least honestly discussed aspect of the entire Mars colonization conversation. The difficulties presented by freezing temperatures, reduced gravity, absent breathable air, and scarce resources are real and demanding, but they are, in principle, addressable through technological development. We can build more effective heaters, design closed-loop life support systems, and manufacture habitat components from locally available materials. These are hard problems, but they belong to the category of problems that engineering exists specifically to solve. The radiation problem belongs to a different category entirely. No wall thick enough to stop cosmic rays could be physically transported to Mars, no technology can manufacture a replacement magnetic field, and no human timescale process can restore a meaningful atmosphere to the planet. The physics of what Mars fundamentally is, a world permanently stripped of its protective systems by the irreversible failure of its internal engine, does not yield to engineering approaches because it is not an engineering problem. It is a direct expression of thermodynamic and electromagnetic law applied to the interior of a planet across geological time. Understanding that distinction honestly requires confronting something deeper about the relationship between life and the specific conditions that permitted life to emerge and persist on Earth. Life did not emerge on Earth in spite of its physical environment. It emerged specifically because of an extraordinarily rare and precisely calibrated convergence of conditions that included far more than acceptable temperatures and the right chemical ingredients. It required a large, long-lived molten iron core actively generating a protective magnetic field. It required a thick, chemically complex atmosphere providing meaningful radiation attenuation at the surface. It required a large, stabilizing moon, preventing the kind of catastrophic axial variations that would periodically sterilize the surface. And it required an orbital position providing a temperature range permitting liquid water to persist across geological timescales. Remove any single one of these interlocking conditions, and the entire biological experiment collapses. Mars removed several of them simultaneously, permanently, and billions of years before humanity had any say in the matter. There is a particular brand of human optimism that has served our species extraordinarily well throughout history. It is the deep conviction that any problem, given sufficient ingenuity and sustained determination, can eventually be solved. This belief has driven human beings across oceans without maps, into the vacuum of space without prior experience, and through every seemingly insurmountable obstacle that has ever stood between our current circumstances and the next stage of development. It is a foundational feature of human civilization that genuinely deserves respect. However, This powerful optimism carries a hidden and dangerous assumption embedded within it. The assumption that the universe classifies every obstacle as an engineering problem awaiting a sufficiently creative solution. The cosmos does not make that concession. There are physical realities that are not problems to be solved, but conditions to be honestly understood and accepted as permanent. The frozen geodynamo of Mars is precisely such a condition. The Martian core will not remelt, and this statement is not pessimism or a failure of scientific imagination. It is a direct application of thermodynamic law to the physical circumstances of a smaller planet that has already permanently dissipated its thermal energy. The heat is gone, and the engine cannot restart through any mechanism available within planetary physics. The magnetic field will not return. The solar wind will continue stripping the upper atmosphere for billions of years, and cosmic rays will continue penetrating the surface with complete indifference to human structures. Every visible feature of Mars tells this same story with complete consistency, proving that it is a permanently dead world. A profound perspective shift becomes available when you fully absorb this reality without filtering it through wishful thinking. When you stop viewing Mars as a destination and start seeing it as a mirror, you realize that Earth is a profound outlier that we must protect at all costs. If you want to keep exploring the deep truths of our universe and discover what it takes to truly safeguard our existence, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment with your thoughts below, and share this video with anyone who needs a reality check about our future in the cosmos.